So, how do you build a $20 billion company that completely changes the game for an entire industry? Well, it definitely takes more than just one great idea. That's what we're going to dig into today. We're distilling the most important lessons from Figma CEO Dylan Field and tracing that incredible journey from a dorm room idea to an absolute design powerhouse. All right, let's get into it. So, we're actually going to start near the end here with this really provocative quote from Dylan. He's looking at the AI we have today, all the chat boxes and prompts, and he sees it as the clunky command line beginning of something massive. It's a peek into his vision for what's next. But, to really get how he arrived at that thought, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning. All right, so part one, we're heading back to the very start. Because you got to remember, before Figma was, well, Figma, it was just a whisper of an idea. And honestly, it wasn't even a clear one. It was just two co-founders, Dylan Field and Evan Wallace, staring at a totally blank page, trying to figure out what to build. So the first big fork in the road, it all came down to one question. Why now? For Dylan, the answer was drones. He thought that was the next big thing. But his co-founder, Evan, who's a total technical wizard, he was convinced the future was WebGL. That's this tech that lets you do super powerful graphics right in a web browser. Evan just wasn't feeling the drone thing. He was all in on WebGL. And, well, he won that argument. And that single choice, betting on the browser instead of hardware, that set the stage for everything Figma would become. And man, that path they chose, it was a long one. This was no overnight success story. I mean, they started kicking around ideas in 2011, but it took them until the middle of 2013 just to nail down the core concept for a design tool. And the first public version, that didn't even come out until 2016. I mean, think about that. 5 whole years of just grinding it out before the world even saw the product. And believe me, it was not a straight line to success. They hit some real lows. At one point in 2012, Dylan got it in his head that memes are going to the moon. So they spent a whole week building what he now calls a great fucking meme generator. A week later, they were both basically like, what are we doing? And we're ready to throw in the towel, questioning why they'd even dropped out of college. It's a funny story, but it's a great reminder that even the biggest visionaries can get sidetracked before they find their real purpose. Okay, so that brings us to the present and to section 2, Figma's playbook for actually launching a product. Once they finally had their idea locked in, what's fascinating is how they brought it to market. It basically flew in the face of everything you hear in Silicon Valley. You know the drill if you're in the startup world, right? Everyone tells you the same thing. Launch early, get it out there, get feedback, fail fast. It's practically the Bible of building a startup. But Figma? They didn't do that. And why not? Because they were getting feedback. And as Dylan puts it, the feedback was crystal clear. People were literally telling them, nope, it's not ready. So instead of rushing out a public launch, they built a completely different system. They built their own system, this amazing feedback loop. First, Dylan would just cold email his design heroes, the people he looked up to. And he wasn't looking for praise. He was actively looking for them to tear it apart because he knew the real gold was in the criticism. Then they take that brutally honest feedback, go back, and relentlessly make the product better. And here's the magic part. They go back to those same critics, show them the changes, and slowly, one by one, turn their biggest doubters into their biggest fans. Okay, just let this number sink in for a second. 5. That's how many years went by between when they founded the company and when they finally started charging for the product. That's 5 years of grinding, of iterating, of building their community, all before they asked for a single penny. It was this radical, long-term bet on just making the product incredible. And all that patience, it led Dylan to this really powerful idea. He doesn't really talk about product market fit. He talks about product market pull. See the difference? It's not about fitting in to an existing market. It's about the market pulling the product out of you. Like they're begging for it, demanding more features, sending you massive documents with ideas because they believe in the vision so much. And if you want the perfect example of product market pull, I mean, it doesn't get better than this. Microsoft literally calls them up and says, hey, this thing is spreading like wildfire over here inside our company. It's actually a problem for us because you guys aren't charging for it. Maybe you should, take our money. When a company like Microsoft is begging you to monetize, you know you've built something special. All right, so we've seen how they launched. Now let's talk about the why behind their product today. This is the core philosophy that explains not just how they got here, but where they're trying to go. And this quote right here, this is the core of it all. Dylan's argument is that as AI makes coding and building things easier and faster for everyone, the technology itself becomes less special. So what makes you special? Your design, your craft, your unique point of view. That's your competitive advantage. That's your moat. And you can totally see this thinking in how they build products. They watch what people are already doing inside Figma, like they see people trying to brainstorm or hack together presentations, and instead of jamming more features into the main tool, they basically carve out that behavior and give it its own dedicated product. That way, each tool can be the best at what it does without making the main experience complicated. And really, it all boils down to this one simple rule Dylan lives by. It solves that classic product design problem, right? How do you make something that's super easy for a total beginner to start with, but also powerful enough for the absolute pros? The answer is you obsess over making the simple stuff feel effortless. You earn your users' trust that way. And then you have permission to make the really complex things possible. So, where does this all go from here? This is where we get into the future, and Dylan's take on how the traditional lines in tech are starting to just melt away. The big idea here is that AI is this great equalizer. It's giving people new powers. And those clean lines that used to separate what a designer does, what a developer does, and what a product manager does, they're getting super blurry. The whole process of making something is becoming way more fluid, way more integrated. But, and this is a key point, it's really important to know where AI shines right now. Dylan says it's amazing for that 0 to 1 moment, going from a blank page to a first prototype. It's incredible for that. But managing a huge, mature 1 to 100 code base? Not so much. Not yet, anyway. Right now, its superpower is speed and creativity at the very beginning. So you take this massive shift in technology, this blurring of roles, and it all leads to this one really powerful final point. This is basically Dylan's call to arms for the whole creative community, which brings us to this really fundamental question. If AI starts handling more of the nitty-gritty execution, what's a designer supposed to do now? What's their new role? Where do they add the most value? And for Dylan, the answer is simple and it's profound. Designers need to be founders. As the how gets easier, the what and the why become everything. And designers, with their natural empathy for users, their vision, their ability to think in systems, they are perfectly suited to lead. They're the ones who should be stepping up and building the next wave of companies. So we'll leave you with this one last question to chew on. Dylan Field's story isn't just about technology. It's about vision, craft, and incredible patience. It shows us that as AI gives every single one of us these creative superpowers, the most important question is, what are you going to do with yours?